Ukraine is in the midst of its war with Russia and is auditing the damage done so far. But how do you assess the damage when the damage is still being done? And maybe it's all a bit premature. As the song goes, send lawyers, guns and money. Join me, Darasz, on how we got here.
Since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, many cities and villages across the country have been largely reduced to rubble. The damage done to civilian as well as industrial infrastructure is staggering, considering that Russia's main objective isn't obliterating the country as a whole. The sectors that have sustained the most damage are agriculture and industry. According to the estimates made last year, the damage to Ukraine's infrastructure in these fields was around $135 billion, a number that has only grown since. The number representing the total economic damage done to Ukraine by Russia is even more shocking. According to World Bank data, it is expected to surpass approximately $400 billion in the near future. But even that gargantuan number pales in comparison to the estimated cost of rebuilding Ukraine after the war is over. International bodies have calculated that it would take around $750 billion to fully restore Ukraine to its pre-war state. That's almost 4 times as much as Ukraine's GDP in 2021, just a year before the war. Kyiv has been calling on its international partners to tackle the near-impossible task. Washington, Brussels and others have already pledged billions of dollars to the rebuilding process, but they're not the only ones expected to pay for the damages.
There's one more crucial step that we can take: making Russia pay for Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. What Putin destroyed, Russia should and must pay to rebuild. It's what international law demands. It's what the Ukrainian people deserve. Our Congress has given us the power to seize Russian assets in the United States. We intend to use it.
Just like Germany had to pay out of pocket after World War II, and Iraq had to give up its oil revenues to rebuild Kuwait after its invasion in 1990 due to international pressure, Russia's gas and oil revenues and reparations would be able to cover most of the costs given enough time. Thankfully, through the efforts of EU's Register of Damage for Ukraine, we know exactly how much Ukraine has lost in the war and how much Russia must repay after it's over.
Our guest today is Professor Aleksandra Mężykowska. She's a board member of the Register of Damage for Ukraine. So welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me here.
Great to have you. Compensation, claims, individuals against damage caused by Russia seems a very moral, very strong moral case. Now, you're a member of a body which has been set up, which registers these compensation claims. Can you describe for us, and especially for a Western viewer, who may not know details about what you do, what exactly is the register and how it works in practice? How did it start, for example?
So the first step in ensuring Russia's financial responsibility have been taken by the General Assembly of United Nations. On 14 November 2022, the General Assembly adopted a resolution in which it stressed 3 things. First, it recognized that Russia must bear financial responsibility for all violations of international law and for all damage it has caused to Ukraine. Second, it recommended to states a creation of comprehensive compensation mechanism for reparation for Ukraine. And thirdly, as the first step in creating this mechanism, it recommended to states, in cooperation with Ukraine, the creation of a register of damage. So we are perfectly aware, and you know that the resolutions of the General Assembly are not legally binding, unlike the resolutions of the Security Council of United Nations. However, they express the will of states and their intent. And this is very important from this point of view, because 94 states voted in favor of adoption of this resolution. The next steps in creation of this compensation mechanism, and especially in the register, were taken by the Council of Europe. It is an international regional organization, And in May 2023, member states of the Council of Europe adopted a so-called enlarged partial agreement establishing a register of damage for Ukraine. Enlarged partial agreements are a specific form of cooperation of states because they do not require the participation of all member states of the Council of Europe, however, are open for states that are non-members. And in consequence, today we have 44 members of the register. These are 43 states, mainly Council of Europe states, but also the US, Canada and Japan, and the European Union.
And your job is to log, to record claims that you receive as a body?
Yes, because the register's tasks include receiving, processing and registering claims. So the register does not have adjudication powers. So these powers will be entrusted with another body, another body that will be created within the framework of the whole compensation mechanism.
So on a practical level, as we talked earlier, someone who suffers damage, gets their flat blown up or loses their house or whatever as a result of a missile strike, they assess the damage, the monetary damage that they've suffered, and forward the claim directly to you. To the register.
Yes, claims to the register may be submitted by individuals, by legal persons, and also by the state of Ukraine, including its regional and local authorities and state-owned and state-controlled bodies.
You're an international law expert. What are the precedents for this kind of organisation? We've heard of reparation claims being made after a war, end of the First World War, for example, or the Polish claim against Germany. Have there been any previous examples of claims against the country during a war? Or is this totally new territory?
States that voted in favor of the resolution of the General Assembly of United Nations were perfectly aware that although it is instructive to look back at previous examples of this kind of compensation mechanism, the mechanism for Ukraine has to be shaped in a different way from various perspectives. The first reason is that the conflict is still ongoing, and the previous mechanisms were established after the war. The second thing is that the aggressor is the permanent member of Security Council. Thus, we don't have the possibility to create a compensation mechanism on the basis of the resolution of the Security Council.
Yes.
The third.
So you have the UN General Assembly versus the Security Council, and the Security Council is one of the main aggressors and can block anything, can't it?
Yes, can block anything. Therefore, the states, they have to think out of the box and shape the compensation mechanism in a different way than the mechanisms that have been established before. What I would like to say is that international mass claims compensation mechanisms are a unique but a very important form of international adjudication established in order to consider claims resulting from war-related events or other traumatic historical events. And we have a number of significant examples from the past. I think that you would like us to mention, for example, the compensation commission created on the basis of the Security Council, of the resolution of the Security Council of 1991 after the aggression of Iraq against Kuwait. But we have also other examples, and here I would like to mention the example of Ethiopia-Eritrea Claims Commission, which was a unique commission because it was established on the basis of a bilateral agreement between these two states. And it was a commission that was exceptional, for example, for me, from yet another reason. It is a commission that awarded compensation for intangible damage, for example, for destruction of historical sites. And this is important also from the perspective of Ukraine and different kind of damage, loss and injury
Yes.
that we would like to compensate within the mechanism created for Ukraine.
How far does a modern state go back in its claims? Okay, we have these Eritrea and Ethiopia, a modern, if we can say that way, a modern war. Russia and Ukraine, obviously the war is still ongoing. But how far can a modern state reach back into the past and have a case for compensation against another state? Are we opening a complete can of worms in terms of claim and counterclaim between states today?
I would like to concentrate on the mechanism that is created for Ukraine, and here the decision of states, as well states that voted in favor of the resolution of the General Assembly of United Nations, and states within the Council of Europe that created the register, they decided that the starting date for claims should be 24th of February 2020.
Okay, so there's a statute of limitations in that sense. As we draw our conclusion to a close, the big question, how do we get Russia to pay the compensation when it evidently doesn't want to? It evidently doesn't feel it morally has to. It feels justified in the war.
Yes, it's true what you said. However, it is evident that reparation for Ukraine should be financed from Russian funds. And there are several options that are currently discussed. The first option is the takeover of Russian state's assets and assets of individuals that are immobilized and frozen in foreign jurisdictions under restrictive measures regime. And the second option is reuse of the assets that have been frozen or immobilized. As far as the first option is concerned, so the option of confiscation, there are difficult legal and practical questions.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the legal status of that sort of action.
Yes, exactly. There are important legal questions, and for example, there is a question whether the assets of the Central Bank of Russia, because we speak of these assets, whether they are covered by the state's immunity, and if yes, to what extent. The second question is that concerns the protection of the individuals, concerns the scope of protection offered in foreign jurisdictions. And of course there is a question of the influence of a possible confiscation on the stability of financial markets.
Yes. It sounds brutal to say, but these questions have to come down to a financial sum in the end, don't they?
Yes, these questions have to be decided by states. However, I would like to draw your attention to another option, and this option is very intensively discussed, and some decisions have already been taken on it. It is the option of reuse of Russian assets. The first decisions on reusing Russian assets have already been taken within the European Union, because in February 2024, European Union adopted two regulations that clarify obligations of financial institutions that are holding assets and reserves of Central Bank of Russia.
Yeah. Ammunition and accountants, I think, are probably what Ukraine needs. But thank you very much, Professor Mężykowska, for coming on to the programme.
Thank you very much.
That's all we have time for today, so join us next time for How We Got Here.